Welcome back. You're watching Newseye, and we're talking about an article that was published in the Nation newspaper here in Pakistan that alleged that a journalist for the Wall Street Journal is a spy working for CIA, Mossad, and with links to Blackwater as well. I'm joined on the line tonight by Aiden White. He's the General Secretary with the International Federation of Journalists, and we're also joined in our studio in Islamabad tonight by the editor of the Nation newspaper, Shirin Mazari. Good evening to you both. Aiden White, if I can come to you now. How concerned is the Federation by this article?
Well, I have to say that we're very shocked by this article. I mean, the problem about it is that we're extremely concerned by the fact that there's not much substance to the evidence against this reporter. And what this article does, it seems to us, is merely using pretty murky sources and not much evidence. It seems to point a finger at a journalist in such a way that actually threatens the safety of that journalist and indeed threatens the safety of all journalists. I mean, the problem about it is this report just merely sort of transmits an accusation that this journalist has been acting as a spy. And this allegation is one of the most dangerous allegations that can be made against any journalist. We have had numerous cases of governments and military authorities just picking up journalists and very often detaining them or imprisoning them or subjecting them to violence on the basis that because they ask questions, because they're talking to people that the authorities would not like them to talk to, they are acting as spies. Well, I mean, it's just not acceptable, and it seems to me that a newspaper which gets into the business of casually transmitting accusations like this is doing a real disservice not only to its own journalists but actually to every journalist who's out there in the field.
How do allegations like this impact the lives and the way journalists can operate in places particularly like war zones we're seeing here in Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Well, it's extremely difficult. I mean, as you know, what are journalists supposed to do if they're to understand the situation? First of all, they have to go into the area and they have to find out what's going on. That means they have to ask questions. In order to get a real picture of what's going on, they have to ask questions of all people involved in conflict and all sides in a particular dispute. That means they go around and they talk to people. I've had a long experience of working with journalists and myself working in areas where it's sometimes required that you speak to people who represent groups that are not very pleasant and not democratic. But you need to do that in order to get a real picture of what's going on. And the fact of the matter is, whenever there's a high-profile dispute, whether it's in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Palestine, Colombia, or many parts of the world where there are regional disputes, journalists who are trying to find out what's going on find themselves casually victims of being accused of being spies. And this accusation comes very often from people who want to stop journalists finding out what's really going on. So for us, this is a terrible sort of situation, and I'm very surprised that a newspaper like The Nation should find itself in a position, you know, casually, in my view, and recklessly transmitting information which puts journalists at risk.
And what is the IFJ doing to protect not only international journalists and foreign correspondents, but also journalists here in Pakistan?
Well, we're working with our colleagues at the Pakistan Federal Union of Journalists, and we have been for some time, you know, highlighting the problems that Pakistani journalists face, and they face numerous problems. There is essentially the question of safety of journalists. This is our primary concern. Violence against journalists is all too common these days, and we've had many instances of journalists being subject to violence, intimidation in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it's something we campaign very strongly against. So we're trying to provide assistance and training to journalists to help them to cope with the risks that they face, but we're also trying to find ways in which we can make sure that there can be a fresh dialogue with the authorities to sort of lift the pressure that is very often put on journalists. And we know that in Pakistan that pressure has been very strong in recent years.
Shirin Mazari says that she has the right, or her newspaper has the right, to question the activities of journalists when they seem suspicious.
No, I said when they break the law of the land.
Okay, Shirin Mazari, would you like to respond to what Aiden White said?
Please get my statements correct, yes.
Aiden White?
Journalists should act within the law. I'm not a lawbreaker, and I don't encourage to lawbreak, but sometimes laws are deliberately used to try to stop journalists actually carrying out their work, and there's arbitrary application of law, particularly on the freedom of movement of journalists, is one of the sort of most difficult things that journalists have to face. So very often journalists will suddenly find themselves arrested and put in jail because someone will tell them they've broken the law by being in the wrong place. They shouldn't be there. They don't have the right to be there. They don't have a permit to be there. Now, it seems to us we have to be very careful before we just say, oh, these journalists have broken the law, or this journalist has broken the law. Therefore, it's fair enough then to actually make allegations against them. And that's not sustainable. I mean, I think Shirin Mazari has got a case to answer here, that if you have got serious evidence against this journalist, you should bring this evidence to the fore so that it can be properly dealt with. But if you're only working on the basis of rumour and speculation and gossip, then it is reckless. Absolutely unacceptable.
Well, you obviously have not read the story. Otherwise, you would have known that, one, we spoke to the journalist in question, and he accepted that he had had all these meetings. He also knows that he went in without the permission of the government into areas where foreign journalists require permission. So it's not as if we did not contact the journalists. We also basically put a question mark that are they or are they not, and left it for the readers to decide. But I do think that there is a certain hypocrisy here, because I didn't see anything being raised about the Pakistani journalists who were being persecuted in the case of the Blackwater issue. I keep repeating that because at least in Pakistan the media needs to be fair to its own journalists first.